So as I say, we're on the third and final Sunday looking at fasting, which you're probably quite pleased to know that we're going to be moving on to another practice soon, and Easter's around the corner as well. But I wonder, as we've journeyed through fasting over just a few weeks, I wonder whether it stirred anything within you. Perhaps a challenge within you to think maybe there's an invitation of God in this to say, actually, I'm going to give that a go. That, yeah, there's stuff going on in my life or in the life of my friend or in the world around me that I see that perhaps it is a case of actually fasting and praying about that would make more of an impact. Because we believe, and it tells us in Scripture, that there are some things that only work through prayer and fasting. That when prayer and fasting are put together, things are amplified. So maybe there's an invitation there for our own discipleship, our own journey with Jesus, to say, actually, I'm going to give that a go and see what God may want to say to me through it. I'm going to take that day and I'm going to humble myself. I'm going to go to that place. I'm going to give up food for a day. And this is by no means anything new. This isn't a fad that we're joining in with. This is ancient spiritual practices that the church have been doing throughout history. Followers of Jesus have been fasting and praying together. And we want to recapture this ancient practice for our lives today. Perhaps the future of the spiritual life is ancient rather than something new and exciting. It's about looking back at ancient things, bringing things out of the storehouse. And so far, we've looked at a few different aspects of fasting. We've looked at how fasting helps us to offer ourselves to God, to come before Him, bring all of ourselves, not just our minds or our hearts, but our stomachs, our whole being. We've talked about having a renewed, embodied spirituality that actually I bring all of myself in prayer to God through fasting. And we've looked at how it helps us to humble ourselves and to grow in holiness, to lift to the surface those things in our lives which God wants to help remove or help us to grow in. One thing that we haven't spoken about that is also key to fasting is how it helps us to amplify our prayers, to grow in the ability to not just hear God, but also be heard by God clearer. And this morning we're looking at how fasting helps us to stand with the poor. Perhaps an element of fasting that we've never thought of before. It's very much an external thing to do with fasting, not an internal thing that I work on myself, but something outside of myself. And as we dig into this, before we go too deep, I just want to outline some statistics from our world and from closer to home. So over 2 billion people globally are living in poverty right now. And around 831 million are living in what's referred to as extreme poverty. That's characterized by having less than $3 a day to live on. That's a crazy number. Some of us earn a lot more than that in 1 hour of our day. Some people have that to live on for a whole day. Here in the UK, a bit closer to home, this data comes from the Trussell Trust. In 2025, Trussell Trust supplied 2.89 million emergency food parcels distributed through places like Bridge the Gap and other churches and organizations. 14.1 million people are experiencing what's known as food insecurity, not knowing if there's going to be enough food, not knowing where the next meal may come from, not knowing if the kids will go to bed hungry tonight. That's 1 in 6 houses. Think about how many houses are on your street. 1 in 6 may be experiencing food insecurity. That's 3.8 million children. That's a big number. 27%, or 1 in 4 children, are growing up in food insecurity. Not just a day, but growing up, unsure whether they're going to have lunch at school, dinner when they get home, or if they do, what it's going to be. You know, I find that really challenging. We live by a menu, and when we cook at home, I know for the next 3-4 days what I'm going to have for dinner, because I know it's going to be there. The fear of not knowing if or what it's going to be. That's really hard. In 2024, 5% of people reported not eating for a whole day because they couldn't afford or couldn't have access to food. Now, that might seem like a small number, 5%, but that's a lot of people around the whole of the UK. When we fast, we go without food, but that's my choice. People are not getting that choice. And 25% of people who are experiencing food insecurity are reportedly from an ethnic minority group, compared to 14% of people from a white background. There's a racial injustice at work in this as well. Those who are not from white backgrounds are being hit harder by food insecurity than those who are from white backgrounds. It's not just about food, but there's more at work in this. Meanwhile, so those numbers are not very nice to look at. Meanwhile, I'm afraid it gets worse, just for a few minutes. There's around 10.7 million tons of food waste in the UK each year. Reportedly, 70% of which is still edible, still good to eat, thrown away. That adds up to about 17 billion pounds of food waste each year, which is enough. I did a bit of Googling on this. It's enough to feed 30 million people, or the whole of the UK for 11 weeks. And the average family of 4 spends around £1,000 a year on wasted food. We are living at the moment in a cost of living crisis, and we're throwing food and money down the drain in the food bin. So what does this tell us? Well, it says that millions of people go hungry every single day and are living in poverty. Meanwhile, millions more have more than enough and they don't know what to do with it. It literally just goes in the bin. These are really not good numbers. These are heartbreaking, painful statistics. And I think it would be easy for us to look at these and say, well, what chance have I got? What difference can I actually make? 10 million tons of food waste each year. 1 in 4 children going hungry. I'm a really small person. I can make sure that I don't throw anything away that isn't genuinely gone off, deserves to go in the food bin. But that's not going to feed 14 million people. It can be easy to shrink away from that and say, what can I do about it? But I think actually instead the question we could ask ourselves is there a practice from the way of Jesus to help me as a follower of Jesus today to stand in the face of this injustice? And the answer is yes. Fasting. Fasting is a way of us standing in the face of this injustice. Now that might seem a bit weird and you're not sure how that's going to work. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. Because today we're shifting focus from fasting being a practice of something that's very internal, offering myself to God, humbling myself, to something external, focused on others, those outside of myself. It's now not just something that's about my own personal transformation, but it's something that is about community transformation. Throughout church history, as we've said, followers of the way of Jesus have practiced fasting as a way of aligning themselves, moving themselves to stand with those and care for those who are hungry, who are poor, and who are living on the margins of society. Throughout all of church history, it's been a practice that they've done, not just to make themselves feel good or to have themselves heard by God, but to move themselves to be in proximity to those in need. But we've lost that discipline, especially in the Western church, in our world. We've lost the discipline. It's acknowledging that fasting is not just about me. And actually, in our culture, in our world, which I think is really influenced by individualism, and it's all about me, this is a way for us to fly in the face of that and stand up and say, actually, it's not all about me. It's a way to stand with those in need. A way to think about it is that fasting can be used as a vehicle for justice. And perhaps this is something new to us. For me, when I first was practicing fasting regularly just over a year ago, I'd never thought that it could be like this. I thought, it's something you do for yourself. not that it's a way of me standing in the face of injustice. But the reality is there is nothing new about this. If we turn to Scripture, if you've got a Bible, there's some on the shelf under the stairs. Turn with us to Isaiah chapter 58. Somewhere in the Old Testament, Isaiah is one of the big named prophets of the Old Testament. So this idea that fasting is a vehicle for justice is a very old, ancient idea. This is what we read in Isaiah 58. Shout it aloud. Do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion and to the descendants of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if there were a nation that does what is right and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarrel and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast? A day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, "Here am I." If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the old age foundations. You will be called the repairer of broken walls, the restorer of streets with dwellings. So there's a conversation there. Those are the words of Isaiah spoken out to the people, of God responding to the cries of his people. They're crying out. They're saying, "God, where are you? Hey, God, what's going on? We're fasting here. Aren't you seeing it? Look how good we are. We're humbling ourselves before you. Why aren't you doing anything about this?" But God's response is a challenging response. Is that what you call a fast? A day where you're still doing as you please, exploiting all of your workers, quarreling and strife, arguing with one another, beating each other with wicked fists, it says. Essentially, yeah, you might be fasting, you might be going without food, but you're still living in a way that is not loving. You're still living for yourself. This is how God adds to his response. He says, keep skipping ahead. He says, is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? In other words, by fasting this way, you're loving your neighbor as yourself. It's about loving your neighbor as yourself, not about getting what you want, but actually it's about acknowledging that there are those in our world in need. That language of yoke is an oppressive language. It was a tool that was used to go over animals so they could carry things. We see in Jesus' words that he's come. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. It's used throughout Scripture as a way of talking about an oppressive weight put on people. So yeah, we might be fasting, but if we're still just treating people badly, ignoring those who are being held down by society, overlooked, ignored, then what good is our fasting if it's just about ourselves? Because it's not all about us. So often we can get tricked into believing that this life we live as followers of Jesus is about just make sure you're a good person and do what you do. Look after yourself. But those are kind of lies that come in from our world that says, look after number one. You're the most important person in your life. The life of a follower of Jesus is a radically different kind of life. A life that is specifically about other people. We may work on ourselves, not for our own benefit, but for the benefit of those around us. It's also about others, not just ourselves. Listen to this from St. Augustine, who was a really old guy, a 4th century church father. If you go to Bible college, they love Augustine. I keep throwing these little bits in here and there that come from college. But this is what he says. He says, break your bread for those who are hungry, said Isaiah. Do not believe that fasting suffices. Fasting chastises you, but it does not refresh the other. Do you wish your prayer to reach God? Give it 2 wings, fasting and almsgiving. I love that. It's this kind of beautiful picture that if we want our prayers to reach God, like a bird, it needs 2 wings to fly. Fasting and almsgiving. Now that word almsgiving is really not a word we use anymore these days. I can't remember the last time we spoke about almsgiving. But it really can be translated to mean works of mercy, or other language we might use today would be like generosity, service, justice. So you see, if we practice fasting in this way, as Augustine is talking about, it's about fasting and generosity, fasting and justice. In the same way that we obviously, in our minds, we think fasting and prayer go together. But we don't often put the 2 and 2 of fasting and generosity together. But what Augustine wants to say here is that they go together just as much as fasting and prayer. And so as we kind of draw this into, okay, well, what do I do about this? I want to suggest 3 ways that we can use our fasting as a vehicle for justice. The first one is that we can stand with the hungry. As we fast and we go without food, it's a way of us, in a very small way, just seeing life from somebody else's perspective for a moment. From those who don't get the choice of going without food. We see what it might be like to not have that next meal. To go to bed hungry. We do this because we get the choice, but other people don't. I remember when we were early years of going on summer camps with the youth. We went to one, and they were raising awareness about issues like this, of those in our world living in poverty, living with really small amounts of food or no food at all to live. And they set a challenge for anybody that wanted to. They said, go for the rest of this day. So this is in like our morning session together. They said, the rest of this day, or the week if you wanted to, give away the food that you would be eating, because we're at camp. We eat really well when we go away on camp. But they were saying, why don't give that away to the food thing that they were doing, or you could give the money away. And instead, live on this very small amount of rice and beans that you could have instead. And to be honest, I didn't think anything else of it. I said, that's a really great idea. And off I went to go and eat my lunch. But then as we sat together and we're eating our lunch, a few of our young people came up and said, hey, we signed up to this challenge. Can we give away our food that we would be eating and we're just going to have this? And as I sat there and stuffed my face with my lunch and watched these young people eat this really minuscule amount of rice and beans, which they hated, their faces were quite funny, actually. They were like, this was a terrible idea. You know, everyone else is there eating like their lunch. They're like, this was a really bad idea. But they were like, I'm not okay with that. I've heard this morning about those people living locally or abroad, away from us, like going without food or living on this amount. I want to do something about that. I was deeply challenged. I hadn't given it a second thought, and these young people came up and were like, we're going to do this challenge. And they did. I think they were a bit miserable at the end, but they did. They wanted to raise awareness. They wanted to show to the rest of us, their group, that, hey, this isn't okay. We care about these people who don't get a choice of whether they live on what we live on. They don't get a choice about what they eat. For them, that rice and beans was probably a massive meal. So the first thing we can do is we can stand with the hungry. The second thing is we can share what we have. Obviously, as we fast, we go without our food. So perhaps you've bought food for those meals. You might be skipping breakfast, lunch. You might be skipping a dinner, whatever it is. That food can be given to those who don't have any. You could give it to Bridge the Gap, give it to a local organization working with those who are going hungry. Or perhaps the money that you would save on that, so you go and do your shopping, and instead of buying the food that you're going to eat, that money can be given to organizations who are helping to reach out to those in need. You might choose to give it to something like Bridge the Gap. You might give it to an organization who are working for those living in extreme poverty abroad, living on that $3 a day. Or perhaps you might go and do your shopping and say to Bridge the Gap and say, what do you need a lot of at the moment? Is there anything you're short on that I can go and get as I do my food shopping? And then most supermarkets we go to now, they've got those baskets as you check out. You can get some toiletries, because often it's the other things that get forgotten. They might be able to receive a food parcel, but what about the toiletries? What about the ability to wash clothes, to feed the pet? We can put that in the basket. We can bring it to Gray and Lou, to Bridge the Gap, or to other organizations doing amazing things. We can share what we have. Or we can take the time that we're saving, and perhaps we might be able to help in some small way. Or perhaps, as Graham said earlier, we can actually turn that time. I've got a lunch break here. I'm not eating. I'm fasting. I'm going to pray for those who turn up to Bridge the Gap today. Or for those who have woken up today and have no idea whether they're going to eat. Whether it be here locally or those abroad who, for another day, are going without food. Who just don't know where the next meal might be coming from. As we go without our food, we can turn our fasting not just into going without food, but into generosity somehow. We can share what we have. And thirdly, Graham stole my little point earlier, but we can stand up against evil and injustice in our world. As we fast, it's a protest. Yes, a physical one, denying ourselves food. We feel that. We feel the hunger. We acknowledge that I am going without food. So on the one hand, we're saying, I'm going without food because people around our world don't get the choice. But it's also a spiritual protest. I'm standing up not just physically, but spiritually against the principalities and powers that are unseen in our world. The evil and injustice of people who are going without food. The people who are waking up every day facing mental health struggles, living in fear, living in anxiety. Those who around our world are being sold as possessions, not as human beings, but as slaves. There's more slaves in our world today than there has ever been. That sounds bonkers. That shouldn't be a thing. So we stand up against these things and we say, no, I am not okay with the fact that 1 in 4 children go hungry every day. I am not okay with the fact that I have so much food and there's people just because they live in a different area of the world don't get the opportunities that I've got. We stand up and we say, God, I want to see you do something about this. So I'm not just going to pray with my words, but I'm going to pray with my body and say, your kingdom come. against this injustice. Perhaps you want to gather together with a group of people. Maybe you're in a community of people and you say, right, we're all going to fast on the same day. And we're going to gather and we're going to pray for Bridge the Gap, for those who come and the needs of those who come, the complexities of life that people are living in, for the provision of food, for the peace for those who carry such a burden and hear people's hard lives. That we would gather and pray, and that we would want to see an end to this injustice in our world. And we acknowledge that actually, as I fast, it does something to my prayers as well. I'm going to take a stand with my body because, Lord, I want to see your kingdom come. I'm not okay with those statistics on that screen. And no, I can't do everything, but I'm acknowledging that I can do my small little bit, and I know God, who is in control of our entire universe, is much bigger than I am. And I'm going to take a bigger view of God, not a lesser view of God, and say, God, I believe that you can do something about this. I can't change the fact that 14 million people go hungry, but I can go without food for a day and pray and see something happen. Our fasting is not just about us, it's about those in need. Those who are poor, who are hungry, marginalized by society. And not just individually, but collectively as a community as we do this, we gather together to become a community of love, to become that community of holiness in a culture of indulgence, and say, I'm going to go without because those people don't get a choice. I want to become more selfless, more generous, more servant-hearted. And the way I'm going to do that is by fasting and praying. So, I've thrown a lot out at us there. There's a lot of information this morning. Just a couple of reminders as we finish this practice. Fasting is going without food. That's the baseline is that's what it's about. Remember to drink water as you do it. There are occasions when people may fast without water as well. But a traditional basic fast will be going without food. Continue to drink water. It's good for you, it's healthy, and it helps. It's up to you. This is invitational. It's up to you how you do this. You might choose to skip your lunch, and over your lunch break, you might pray. You might say, I'm going to skip certain meals. I'm going to go for 24 hours. I'm going to do however long. I would also say start small. If you're going to, don't jump into, right, I'm going to fast for 3 days. That's going to be a real challenge, but build it up. So I'm going to skip my lunch. And then next week, I'm going to go without lunch and dinner, or breakfast and lunch, or whatever it might be. Find a way to integrate this into your life as a follower of Jesus. But like I say, it's invitational. It's up to you how you do it, and if you do it, to be honest. But I just wonder, where is God calling your attention towards injustice in our world? And perhaps is he calling you to fast in response to that injustice? How might you respond with fasting and generosity? How might fasting play a part in your life, your apprenticeship to Jesus?